The rain came down in sheets across Interstate 40, the kind of relentless downpour that made even experienced drivers slow to a crawl. Jack Meadows had been driving trucks for 32 years, and he'd seen every kind of weather the road could throw at him. At 59, with silver threading through his dark hair and beard, he'd logged more miles than most people could imagine, crossing the country countless times in his big rig. Tonight he was hauling electronics from Tennessee to California, running a little behind schedule but not worried. Jack had learned long ago that pushing too hard in bad weather was a good way to end up in a ditch or worse. Better to take it slow, arrive late, but arrive safe. The highway stretched ahead of him, his headlights cutting through the rain and darkness. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and traffic had thinned to almost nothing. Most sensible people had pulled off to wait out the storm. Jack was considering doing the same when his headlights caught something. That made him ease off the accelerator. People walking along the shoulder of the highway in this weather. Jack squinted through the rain-streaked windshield, hardly believing what he was seeing. A man and a woman, both soaked through, walking with hunched shoulders against the driving rain. Between them, 2 small children, boys. It looked like maybe 7 or 8 years old. One child wore a blue jacket and carried a backpack. That looked too heavy for his small frame. The other wore an olive green vest and clutched what appeared to be a duffel bag. The woman carried a bag slung over her shoulder, and even from this distance, Jack could see how exhausted they all looked. What in God's name were they doing out here? Jack pulled his truck onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead of them, leaving his running lights on so they could see him. He grabbed his rain jacket from behind the seat and climbed down from the cab, the rain immediately soaking through his jeans despite the jacket. He walked back toward the family, who had stopped moving and were watching him with obvious wariness. Up close, Jack could see they were in even worse shape than he'd thought. The man was probably in his mid-30s, with dark stubble and exhaustion written across his face. He wore a denim jacket that was completely saturated, and his jeans were muddy up to the knees. He'd positioned himself slightly in front of the woman and children, protective, defensive. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s as well, with long dark hair plastered to her face and shoulders. She wore a dark jacket and looked like she was using every ounce of willpower, just to stay standing. Her eyes met Jack's with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The 2 boys were shivering, their lips tinged with blue. They clung to the adults, looking small and frightened and utterly miserable. "Folks," Jack called out over the sound of the rain, keeping his distance so he wouldn't seem threatening. "You all okay? Do you need help?" The man hesitated, clearly trying to decide if accepting help from a stranger on a dark highway was more dangerous than continuing to walk in the storm. "We're fine," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Car broke down a few miles back. We're trying to get to the next town." Jack looked at the children, who were quite obviously not fine, and then back at the man. "The next town is 15 miles from here. You're not going to make it in this weather, not with kids." He softened his voice. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Name's Jack Meadows. I've been driving trucks for over 30 years, and I've got 2 grown kids of my own. Let me at least give you a ride to the next truck stop. You can get warm, dry off, figure out your next move." The man and woman exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations that couples have. Jack could see the exhaustion winning out over caution. "I'm Daniel Torres," the man said finally. "This is my wife Maria and our sons, Miguel and Carlos." He indicated each person as he spoke. We appreciate the offer. We've been walking for over 2 hours." 2 hours? Jack said, shocked. "In this storm? With children? Come on, let's get you all in the truck before you catch pneumonia." He led them back to his rig, opened the passenger side, and helped first Miguel and then Carlos climb up into the cab. Maria followed, and Daniel came last. The cab of Jack's truck was spacious for a big. He'd paid extra for the extended cab with a small sleeping berth in the back, but it was still tight. Quarters with 5 people. Jack climbed back into the driver's seat and cranked up the heat. He pulled out a blanket he kept for emergencies and handed it to Maria. "Here, wrap the boys in this. There are some towels in that compartment behind you." "Thank you," Maria said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you so much." As Jack eased the truck back onto the highway, he glanced over at his passengers. The boys were huddled under the blanket, pressed against their mother. Daniel sat nearest the door. dripping water onto the floor mat, his jaw tight with what might have been shame or worry or both. "So," Jack said conversationally, "what happened with your car?" "Engine just died," Daniel said. "Started making a terrible noise, then stopped completely. Probably the transmission. It's been having problems for months. We didn't have money to fix it properly, and now—" He trailed off. "Where were you headed?" Jack asked. There was a pause, and then Maria answered. "Phoenix. We were trying to get to Phoenix." Jack glanced at them in surprise. "Phoenix? That's still over 1,000 miles from here. You were planning to drive straight through?" "We didn't have much choice," Daniel said quietly. "I got a job offer there. Construction work. It's the best opportunity I've had in years. We packed up everything we could fit in the car and left 3 days ago." "Left from where?" Jack asked. "North Carolina," Maria said. "We've been living in a motel for the past 6 months after we lost our apartment. Daniel was working 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough to save up for a new place. When this job in Phoenix came through, better pay, better benefits, a chance to start over. We knew we had to take it. But we had to be there by Monday. Daniel starts work on Monday morning." Jack did some quick mental math. Today was Friday night. Even if everything had gone perfectly, it would have been a tight schedule. "So when the car died," he prompted. "We didn't know what to do," Daniel said, and Jack heard the frustration and defeat in his voice. "We barely had enough money for gas and cheap food for the trip. We definitely don't have money to tow the car or fix it or rent another one. We sat there on the side of the road for an hour trying to figure out options, and then we decided to walk to the next town and see if there was a homeless shelter or a church or something. Somewhere the boys could at least be warm and dry while we figured things out." "But it started raining harder," Miguel piped up, his small voice muffled by the blanket. "And it got really dark." "We were scared," Carlos added. "There were big trucks going by really fast." Jack felt his chest tighten. These were good people, clearly. Hard-working people who'd been doing everything they could to build a better life for their family. And they'd been walking on the highway in the dark and rain because they'd simply run out of options. "Well," Jack said, "you're safe now. We'll get to the truck stop in about 20 minutes. They've got hot food, showers, a place to sit down and rest." "We can't really afford—" Daniel started, but Jack cut him off. "My treat," he said firmly. "When you have kids walking on a highway in a storm, money's not the issue. Safety is." They drove in relative silence for a while, the only sounds the drumming of rain on the truck's roof and the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Jack's mind was working, turning over possibilities. He was scheduled to deliver his load in California in 3 days. His route took him through Arizona, right past Phoenix, as a matter of fact. He had a big rig with a spacious sleeper cab and an empty passenger seat. And these people desperately needed to get to Phoenix by Monday. It was probably crazy. He barely knew these people. Company policy was strict about unauthorized passengers. There were liability issues, safety concerns, a dozen good reasons to drop them at the truck stop and continue on his way. But Jack thought about his own kids, his daughter Sarah, now 32 and teaching school in Ohio, and his son Tommy, 28 and working as a paramedic in Texas. He thought about how, when they were young and he'd been struggling to make ends meet after his divorce, people had helped him. Neighbors who'd watched the kids when he had to work. Teachers who'd bought them school supplies with their own money. A boss who'd given him advances on his paycheck without hesitation. Kindness had gotten him through those hard years. Kindness and the willingness of strangers to see another person's need and respond to it. "Listen," Jack said as they pulled into the truck stop. "I've got an idea. Let's get you all warm and fed first, and then we'll talk about it." Inside the truck stop's diner, Jack ordered cheeseburgers, fries, and hot chocolate for everyone. The boys' eyes went wide at the sight of real food. Jack wondered when they'd last had a decent meal. Maria and Daniel tried to protest, but Jack waved them off. "Eat," he said simply. "We'll talk after." He watched them demolish the food. The boys eating with the single-minded focus of truly hungry children. Daniel and Maria ate more slowly, but Jack could see the relief on their faces, the way the hot food and warm air were reviving them. Finally, when everyone had finished eating and the boys were starting to yawn, Jack laid out his proposal. "Here's what I'm thinking," he said. "I'm heading to California with a delivery. My route takes me right through Phoenix. I've got room in my cab for passengers, and I've got a sleeper berth in the back where the boys could rest. If you're willing to ride in a truck for the next few days, I can get you to Phoenix by Sunday evening. That gives you a day to settle in before Daniel starts work on Monday." Daniel and Maria stared at him as if he'd just offered them $1 million. You do that?" Maria said. "You take us all the way to Phoenix?" "It's on my way," Jack said with a shrug. "And it seems like a better option than leaving you here, trying to figure out how to cover 1,000 miles with no car and no money." "But what about your company?" Daniel asked. "Won't you get in trouble for having passengers?" "I'll handle that," Jack said. "Let me worry about the details. The question is whether you're comfortable riding with me for the next couple of days." "Comfortable?" Daniel said, and he laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "You just saved our lives. You bought us food. You're offering to drive us across the country. I think comfortable doesn't begin to cover it. Why are you doing this?" Maria asked, searching Jack's face. "You don't know us. We could be anyone." Jack thought about how to answer that. "I've been driving trucks for a long time," he said finally, "and I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is help someone when they need it. No questions, no conditions, just help. People did that for me when I needed it, when I was a single dad trying to raise 2 kids on a trucker's salary. I figure I'm just passing it along." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." They left the truck stop an hour later, with the boys settled in the sleeper berth on a nest of blankets, already drifting off to sleep. Maria sat in the main passenger seat, and Daniel sat on the fold-down jump seat beside her. Jack eased the big rig back onto the highway, heading west into the gradually clearing night. Over the next 2 days, Jack learned the Torres family's story. Daniel had been a skilled carpenter before the economy tanked and construction jobs dried up. He'd taken whatever work he could find, warehouse jobs, landscaping, retail, but nothing paid enough to get ahead. Maria had been working as a home health aide, caring for elderly clients, but her hours had been cut when her agency lost contracts. They'd lost their apartment when the rent went up and they couldn't keep pace. The motel was cheaper than a new apartment would have been, but it meant they couldn't save for deposits and first month's rent. They'd been caught in a trap, working constantly but never earning quite enough to climb out of their situation. The job in Phoenix was with a company that built custom homes, the kind of skilled work Daniel had been trained for. The pay was good, the benefits were solid, and they'd already arranged temporary housing through a friend of a friend. It was their chance to start over, to build stability for their family, and they'd almost lost it because of a broken-down car on a rainy highway. Jack also learned about Miguel and Carlos, who were 7-year-old twins. Miguel was quiet and thoughtful, always watching and listening. Carlos was more talkative, asking questions about the truck, about where they were going, about everything. They were good kids, polite, well-behaved, clearly loved. The boys warmed up to Jack quickly, fascinated by the truck and the experience of riding so high above the road. Jack let them take turns sitting in the passenger seat, pointing out interesting trucks they passed, teaching them about road signs and trucker slang. He heard them giggle for the first time somewhere in New Mexico, and the sound made him smile. At night, they stopped at truck stops where Jack had regular connections. He arranged for the family to shower and rest properly, buying them dinner and breakfast. He called his daughter Sarah and told her what he was doing. "Dad, that's wonderful," she said. "That's exactly the kind of thing you've always done, seeing someone who needs help and just helping them." "I hope I'm doing the right thing," Jack admitted. "You are," Sarah said firmly. "Absolutely you are." On Sunday evening, as they crossed into Phoenix and the city lights spread out before them, Jack saw Daniel and Maria hold hands tightly, their faces reflecting hope and anxiety in equal measure. "This is it," Daniel said quietly. "This is where our new life starts." Jack helped them navigate to the address they'd been given, a modest apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood. The friend who'd arranged their temporary housing was waiting, and there were emotional reunions and introductions. Jack unloaded the few bags the family had brought with them, refusing offers of payment he knew they couldn't afford anyway. "You've done so much for us," Maria said, hugging him tightly. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Jack said. "Just take care of your family. Make this fresh start work." "That's thanks enough." Miguel and Carlos both hugged him too, and Carlos said, "Will we ever see you again, Mr. Jack?" "Maybe," Jack said, ruffling the boy's hair. "I come through Phoenix pretty regularly. If I'm in the area, I'll look you up." He exchanged contact information with Daniel and Maria, then climbed back into his truck. As he pulled away, he looked in his mirror and saw the family standing together, waving. Daniel had his arms around his wife and sons, and even from a distance, Jack could see they were all crying, but they looked like happy tears. Jack continued on to California, made his delivery, and headed back east. Life returned to its normal rhythm of long drives, truck stops, and solitary meals. But something had shifted inside him. The loneliness he'd grown accustomed to felt different now. Less like an inevitable condition and more like something he might be able to change. He started paying more attention to the people around him. Fellow truckers, waitresses, families struggling with car trouble. He started offering help more readily, buying meals for people who looked hungry, giving rides to stranded travelers when it was safe to do so. Small acts of kindness that rippled outward. 3 months later, Jack's phone rang with an unknown Arizona number. He answered it to hear Daniel Torres's excited voice. "Jack, I've been trying to reach you. I wanted to give you an update." "Daniel," Jack said, genuinely pleased. "How are things going?" "Better than we ever imagined," Daniel said. "The job is great. I'm working on beautiful homes, doing the kind of craftsmanship I trained for. Maria found work as a school nurse. The benefits are incredible. We saved enough for our own apartment. The boys are doing great in school. Jack, we're doing it. We're actually making it work." "That's wonderful," Jack said, feeling warmth spread through his chest. "But here's the real reason I'm calling," Daniel continued. "My boss, the owner of the construction company, his name is Robert Hayes. He's opening a new division focused on disaster relief construction, building homes quickly for people who've lost everything in floods. Fires, hurricanes. He needs someone to manage the logistics, supplies, transportation, coordination with relief agencies. It's a big job, and he's offering great pay and the chance to travel, but it needs someone who understands logistics, who knows trucking and transportation, who can handle complex schedules." Jack frowned, not sure where this was going. "Okay. I told him about you," Daniel said. "About how you helped us when we had nothing. About your years of experience driving, your knowledge of routes and regulations. Robert wants to meet you. He thinks you might be perfect for this job. And Jack, this isn't driving. This is management, planning, making a real difference for families in crisis. Would you be interested?" Jack sat in stunned silence. A new job, a chance to use his skills in a different way. Work that had real meaning, helping families rebuild after disasters. "I'm 60 years old," Jack said slowly. "I've been driving trucks my whole adult life." "So you understand the work from the ground up," Daniel countered. "That's exactly what Robert needs. Someone with practical knowledge. Not just someone with a degree who's never actually been on the road. Come meet with him." "What have you got to lose?" 2 weeks later, Jack flew to Phoenix and met with Robert Hayes, a straight-talking man in his 50s, who ran his construction company with integrity and a genuine commitment to quality work. "Daniel tells me you drove his family across several states when they had nowhere else to turn," Robert said. "That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could. I need someone I can trust to handle the logistics for this relief division. Someone who'll treat our clients, people who've lost everything, with respect and compassion. I think you might be that person." They talked for 2 hours about the job, the vision, the logistics. By the end, Robert had offered Jack the position, with a salary that was more than Jack had ever made as a trucker, plus benefits and the chance to make a genuine difference. Jack accepted on the spot. He gave notice to his trucking company, sold his personal truck, and moved to Phoenix. For the first time in decades, he wasn't living on the road. He had an apartment, regular hours, colleagues, and he had work that mattered, coordinating the delivery of supplies to disaster zones, working with relief agencies, ensuring that families got the materials they needed to rebuild their homes and their lives. Daniel and Maria became like family to him. He spent holidays with them, attended Miguel and Carlos's school.